Hey guys, welcome to another edition of On Social, the show that talks about everything that has to do with live video and broadcasting and all that good stuff on the internet. I'm your host, Stephen Haywood, and I'm also joined, and believe it or not, I got to stop myself right there.
I knew you were gonna bring this up.
I, I am here with not just Marty, but I also have
I knew
Jeff.
you were gonna go there.
So,
Hey!
welcome, Marty.
I see I am not the rumors are not true. I am not Jeff.
Well, I think, Jeff, you started that rumor, to be honest.
Uh, I come from the wax museum. I am just a fake, but no. Yeah, I think I did start that rumor a couple weeks back. We've been both working a little bit, and one would hit right when the other would be back, and it's great to be back as a team. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys both back in the saddle. And like I said in the beginning of the show, here in the pre show, if you guys were here, we have a great show lined up for you. But I want to cover a few things before we get going. Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. is approaching very quickly. And so I wanted to let everybody know we will be having a show. It's going to be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which I believe is the 27th. The time is still the same, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, if I got that right. Um, the last show of the year is going to be December 19th, and then we'll be back the week of January 7th, I believe, is the week. So we have 2 weeks down where we're going to be off, and that's a time where I know we all like to get our studios in good working order, do updates to software and hardware, and make sure things are running smooth. I know that's something that we're going to be working on, so that's coming up. Also, we have a great video today by one of our viewers, Art, and of his setup. So we're going to show that later on in the show. And if you have a setup and you want us to kind of go over, look at it, definitely send it in. Or, if you want to be a guest on the show to talk about your setup, we'd love to have you. But Jeff, last week you attended a summit. We had Paul Richards on a couple weeks ago for the Stream Geeks. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that real quick and what happened?
Yeah, it was really, really awesome. I had obviously I wasn't on the show last week. That Thursday, I was doing my game show, and thought maybe with that going into the evening, I wouldn't really have the energy to make it to New York, but I did. I got up in the morning, made the drive, got there right around lunchtime, and it was really, really awesome. Stream Geeks is something that you're going to want to check out in the years to come. The really cool thing about this conference, in my opinion, is that you're able to meet people that are players in the space where you want to be, and it is not so broad and wide that you're going to get lost in the shuffle. You're going to make some great network connections. Obviously, it was great to see Paul Richards, who obviously this is his headlining first year summit. It was I think very well done. At least 100 150 people were there that I saw. I wasn't in some of the other rooms where they're doing workshops, but it was really a great place to get to see folks that are really making a step out into the world of live streaming. And of course, seeing John Mahoney is always a great thing. So if you get a chance to check out Stream Geeks as a summit, this is where you want to do that. I think this is probably one of the most potent places you're going to be able to get great networking and connection, and have the ability to learn a lot of cool things.
Wow, it sounds like a great. Any time with John Mahoney is a great time. Come on now.
Anytime. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a great, it was a great afternoon for me. And there were some really cool devices. There was a couple different companies talking about esports. Obviously, they had a big esports presence there. And I think all in all, we need more of these kind of conferences, because I think, we wait all year. We go to, if we can, we go to NAB, but those things are sometimes so big, you really don't make, I think, the deeper connections that you need to make to really get that two or three, four people that you work with that one day you might want to do your own kind of on social or something like that. So really just the connection point for me is what I thought was really valuable there.
Now I know coming up NAB, hopefully I'm going to get to go out there again this year, maybe do some stuff there. But it's. I heard there were some cool toys there, and Marty was gushing last week all over the Wirecast gear. If you didn't catch that episode, Jeff, and I think you did watch it, but I heard Jeremy was on a couple weeks ago. I looked like he had a pretty good presentation there with the Wirecast gearbox. No.
Yeah, he did, and it was, it was really cool seeing the fly pack that he has designed, because this is, the kind of rack that you can literally bring in anywhere, and within, an hour, you're really rolling. I mean, the setup and the box itself is literally a couple cables. But once you get your cameras going, get your lights up and your mics, it may take you a couple minutes to set up, but then you're able to live stream using Wirecast Gear version 2 from anywhere. And he had a pretty healthy presentation, a lot of attendance on it, and I can't wait to see what the Gear 2 looks like when I have the ability to actually sit down and play with it.
Awesome, awesome. So that was Stream Geek Summit. Maybe next year I'll get to go to it. I don't know. It's a lot for somebody that's not right there on the East Coast to go to, unfortunately, for one day. Um, it's a whole lot of travel. So maybe next year we'll see. We'll see what happens. So
See, if
today,
you guys go, I'll go.
oh, you're gonna go?
If you guys go, I'll go because it's
Oh,
close.
okay.
I'm the closest one, I think, to the city. So yeah,
So that just means Paul's gonna have to put us on a panel. The three of us could do on
That's
social
right.
that'd
live
be awesome.
there from the summit.
There you go.
Say now I'm thinking I
Exactly.
should be on his payroll. So, the topic of today's show was about when is too much too much, and I didn't put it in so many words, but we see a lot of video producers out there trying to overdo their setup, trying to, I don't want to say this derogatorily, but they try to make up for talent that they don't have by making their stream look fabulous, but the content, the quality of the presentation just isn't there. I mean, is that a fair assumption, guys? Does that seem like I know I've seen streams like that, just to be fair.
Yeah,
Marty, you want to go
one of the
first?
things. Yeah, one of the things I see in especially with people that are just starting out, and like you said, Steven, is they'll bring out every effect known to man, and you'll see when you're switching your show, really the main effect, I think really the only effect you use, the only switching effect you use is a cut, and which
Mm-hmm.
is the most basic effect there is. And that cut is probably the most popular effect in television. It's probably used 90% of the time. Probably next popular one is like a DVE, 3D move, or a wipe, and that's about it. Or dissolve. Let's just say
Yeah, I
that's
use
probably the second most popular.
dissolve
And those are very
like that to move your lower
yeah,
third
no,
on and off.
exactly, and those are exactly, and those are very simple effects. But people tend to go crazy with the crazy wipes and star wipes and crazy effects and all that stuff. And unless there's a reason for it to be, it's usually just a distraction. So that's number one. Like when you're referring to that. Um, and we can get into it. Well, I have we can get right into some of the enhancements that you can make. And I'm going to bring up the graphics and let me just go to that page here and switch my shot. And I'm going to bring up this page here. And this is just an example. I just pulled this from the internet as an example of a graphics look. And you see this on CNN's not the only one, but you see on a lot of the cable news stations or any of the news type stations. And a lot of the shows that we see are being done with folks kind of fit this format where you might have an interview style show or talking head style show, and you'll notice in the graphics, there's a lot of graphics on the screen, but it's not like it's out of control. And graphics can, when done right, can enhance a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. So you notice in these shots here, the main title is what they're talking about. In this case, U.S. airstrikes hit ISIS targets, so it's a news topic. Underneath there, you have the name of the person talking, they call it lower third, and her title, and sometimes they'll put the Twitter feed. So you got two lines there that have a lot of information. Underneath that is an unrelated piece of information, like a scroll bar, and in this particular case, they're putting the weather forecast. And you could have a scroll bar where you might have rotating information about your show. So maybe it's where to follow you on Twitter or where to subscribe or if you're running a contest, whatever it is. And then on the top in the red and white text, you have another line, saying that it's breaking news, breaking from overnight. And then on the side, you'll notice their logo called the bug, CNN bug, another piece of information with the time, and then the name of the show, New Day. And then you have the backdrop. So you have a lot of stuff going on, but it doesn't look like it's overly done. So you have 4 lines of information there, but when done right, and also you have the contrasting fonts and colors. That's another thing I noticed, Stephen. Lots of times when people are doing this stuff, is they will there's really no design to it. They'll just pop whatever's up there, and they won't really think about the font, the look.
Mm.
is it readable? How many times, Stephen and Jeff, have you seen where people put up graphics on the screen and the colors are really similar to the background and you can't read the graphic, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, that happens
So
more
you
often than not. Yeah, and it's one of these things too where I'm glad you brought up the design part of it because if, to answer the question, Steve, when is too much too much? If you're doing CNN graphics, but you're not thinking about the more broader idea of what that show's supposed to look like from start to finish, and you're, streaming from your garage and you haven't done anything to add your lighting and you've got boxes behind you, it's a big dichotomy. A lot of times we see with new live streamers, great opens, they bought them on one of the stock footage template sites, and they look beautiful. But then when it gets back to that person, it's out of balance because they're not in a place where they can kind of support that look and image. So some of that is sometimes the trick is to dial down the level of what that looks like. Maybe you don't need the Super Bowl open, but you've got more of an NPR kind of an open where it's more subtle and maybe it's just still pictures that are moving softly and it's 5 or 6 seconds or something like that. But a lot of times you can kind of balance those things out. But you definitely need to take a holistic look at how you want the whole frame of that show to present, even in the nonverbals and the graphics. Obviously, Marty, as you just pointed out very nicely, are critical to making that case.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and that's a really good point, Jeff. As far as the overall look of the show, that goes into branding too. That's something also you want to think about. Is when you create a look, and this is all part of the preparation. Not only do you want it to all kind of fit together, but you want to communicate what the show's about. And a look or a logo, like again, I was shown the CNN example. Everyone knows what that logo is. Those graphics are very, very consistent. In fact, I'll pop it up here. The graphics are very, very consistent, and everyone knows what that look is, including the lower third, the whole look there. When you turn that on, you know what that is. Same thing with your shows. Is when you design a graphics package, you could do the same thing where you can make it look very, very consistent, and over time, people are going to understand. When they see the graphics, oh, it's the Steve and Jeff show, and they know, or the On Social show, and they know what it
Mhm.
is just by looking at it. Um,
But I
I was going to
noticed
say I
too. I
completely
also
lost my train of thought.
I noticed too in CNN's backdrop too, and sometimes people nail the graphics. They do. They'll nail like the lower third. They'll get the text right, but then they tend to make their background a little bit too busy. And I thought maybe we could kind of discuss this. I'm going to go through each one of our shots here so you can kind of get a glimpse of this because we are all using a blurred effect to our background where we're all sitting. It looks like we are sitting in a studio. Some are using green screens. Some of us are using a TV to give the illusion of a green screen. But I'm going to go through and you can see and Marty, if you can kind of go over the reasoning that we're doing this blurred background and what kind of aesthetics that brings to the live video, when having maybe too much in your background.
Oh, absolutely. So in my particular, like in your case, Stephen, you're using an actual monitor in back of you, and you have that blurred. You actually created that image to be blurred out. In my case, I'm using a green screen, and that video that you see behind me is a looping video that plays, and will certainly, Jeff, I think you're doing something with your background. You can get into that in a second. But the reason why it's blurred is it creates an illusion of depth. So if I had just that, and also it doesn't interfere with the main subject, which should be yourself in the shot, in this particular shot. And so it creates a depth of field effect where it looks like these monitors are in the room here, and they look like they're a little further back. Like it gives a illusion of space, and like I'm in a real studio. In fact, I can reach out and actually touch my green screen. I'm touching it right now. You can't see it, but I'm not touching the back, and it's just an arm length away. And so, but you can't tell because it looks further away. So a lot of things in video and TV is really the illusion. It's the illusion of what's in the box. And when we talk about even live sets, and you're setting up a set, say you don't have a green screen and you're doing a real background, it's all that matters is what's in that frame. It could be a mess outside the frame, and I think we've all been on set before where behind the anchor desk, it's a mess. It could be like all front and all that stuff. And Jeff, you know what I'm talking about. It's like it doesn't really matter. It's like it's just
Yeah.
whatever appears in
You don't want to see
you
under
know, and
my
you should
desk.
see. these sets are very flimsy. They just have to look good, you know? So it just has to have the look, you know? So, Jeff, I'll pass it to you as far as what your background
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you did a good, really good job describing, the whole depth idea. I mean, in 3D animation and modeling, one of the things that people try to do is replicate virtual sets, and I've done a number of those. The trick is actually building in the imperfections, not keeping it so perfect. And so the depth of field creates that bigger than life space. Like you said, it makes it feel like maybe you're in a bigger room. And for folks that don't have a green screen, I've even seen people buy these 10-foot by 8-foot trade show fabric displays, and they'll put a background on there, but they'll print it in a blurred mode. And that way, when they put it behind them, maybe it's only a foot or two back, still gives that impression that, hey, there's a little bit of room and I'm in a much bigger environment. And you're right, I'm using a green screen. Mine is about 5 foot back. And you're right, my room is a wreck everywhere around it, but it's looks good here. And I think it goes hand in hand with the a lot of times in the the news days, reporters sitting there talking about breaking news with his nice coat on, and he's sitting there in shorts and sandals. It's just kind of the mystique and the vibe of what TV looks like. But the whole idea is to match, from end to end what you want your show to look like, not only in content, but in this setting, how do you want it to come across, like I said, non-verbally, because that's really the bigger thing. People gather a perspective and a vibe for what you're all about before you ever say a word. And so that's I think a good starting point.
And before we go any further, Steve in the LinkedIn chat says it's always about the story, not the effects. So he's right on with that. And
Mhm.
and we could also talk about this. A lot of guys that are doing these triple box shots, double box shots, or side by side shots, however you want to call them. One of the things that we do, you can see there's subtle motion behind this. It's not just a static image, and that's just so you can't. It's so you don't focus on it, but it's not fast enough to drive you bananas. And if you look at the lower third, there's even a little bit of motion there on that lower third, just enough to be subtle, but it's not overly done. And I think that sometimes, Marty, that can get out of hand, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about that. That's a really good point as far as, and a lot of times when people are using these motion backgrounds, they may be using a stock piece of video, and that's a great pro tip. Is and sometimes in your production software, you can have the playback, and you can actually control the frame rate. So just slow it down a little bit, and having that slow pace and slowing it's good because it doesn't become so distracting. You'll notice on network news cable, especially cable news, the motion backgrounds, and they may be using stripes or bars and everything. It's always a kind of a slow motion, 20% move. It's just without because the main focus should be the people that are actually talking on the screen. So you want to keep that the main. You don't want anything. And you're right. The way you do your background here for the show, you intentionally slow that down so it
Mhm.
doesn't become distracting. But it does provide a little bit of motion, a little bit of depth to the shot so it's not so you just want a little little oomph to it, I guess, you know?
So what other tips do you have for us in building this? Is if you want to kind of go over a checklist, if you will, on like, okay, I want because there's honestly it comes down to perspective, right? I mean, obviously you got to look at this, and this is the way I was always told. If you look at it and you can't stand watching it, you can't expect other people to be able to watch it too. So that's kind of my judge. But I mean, everybody's taste is different. I get that. So what do you think? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add one quick tip ahead before I go to this next one. But consider, along with your graphics package, consider doing like a generic open and close, like even with video, where you might do a like you do, Stephen, for the show. You have a generic open that you
Mm-hmm.
run with music and effects, and it's part of the branding. So every time someone sees that open, they know what on social show is. Another thing to do is, especially if you're doing live streaming video, it doesn't all have to be live. So I'm gonna show so you could do something like where you could play a pre-recorded video, which I'm gonna do right now. And now this particular video is from when I was in Denver doing a party. I'm showing the Wirecast gear. I can describe it. I'm thinking, well, I use the gear. I'm talking over the video, and this is something I shot ahead of time, and I can show that, and it works quite nicely. And then you can switch back to your other shot after you're done talking about it and you're ready to go. Not only can you do a VO and show a pre-recorded video, but you can do a full package. So, and I think we're going to have one of those later in the show. We're going to show a package from a viewer of his Wirecast setup. And that's another thing. We're doing a live show, but you're going to show a pre-recorded video, add to the story of what we're talking about. So consider doing that. And if you're using any of these software, any of these production packages, any of these production software switchers, be able to play back video as well. The other thing I will add is I'll add one more tip, and this is a Wirecast setting, and I know other packages have it. I'm gonna switch to my Twitter feed, and you'll probably have to drop my lower third to see this. And I'm gonna switch here, so you can do something like this where you add a Twitter feed, and this is a live Twitter feed. And if you're doing a live show, you can put live social media comments. So and this is just one example from Wirecast. Wirecast allows you to put a live Twitter feed up, so they have a graphic already set. You can connect your Twitter to it through the Wirecast software, and you actually pull in the data from Twitter, and you can search hashtags. So, say if your hashtag is on social, you can bring it in. This is just an example. This is just a random tweet I pulled in just to show you what it looks like on the screen. But you can do this with Twitter. You could do it with YouTube or Facebook, and there's various packages and various ways to do it, much more involved than what we can do and get involved here. But that's a way that people love to see their comments on the screen. So there's very packages that you can do, and you can kind of talk to that, and then interact with your audience that way. So that's another great way to addition that you can add to your show.
And something I want to bring up, Jeff, is for both you and Marty here on this for discussion. Both of you guys are set up with switchers. Both of you guys are using Wirecast. Both of you guys have that setup going on right now. And I have a setup here that I'm doing the switching and producing, but you guys could be blowing up all these effects and throwing all these things out there, but you're not. You're utilizing certain effects to take the load off of me, like Marty pulling up that Twitter feed. I know, Jeff, we talked about in the future, there's going to be some things that you're going to be triggering from your end.
Yep.
I think that there's something to be said about, working with your co-host if they have a setup and you guys kind of bouncing out the work to be able to do something like that. I mean, Jeff, what's your take on that? I mean, I talked a little bit in the pre-show about it's kind of like a musician, right? The drummer, I'm a drummer, so I'm not going to sit there and beat every drum and every cymbal on every song every single time. It's just it's animal, it's too much.
It
So
is, yeah. Yeah, the reality is it's just like you said, just like playing music. In the situation we're in now, we are contributors to a bigger conversation that you're leading. And so there's little value in trying to, add dissolves and effects and fly things in and out just for the fact of doing it. If you're actually using technology to try to replace content, you've already made a major mistake and you need to rethink what you're trying to tell people because you've got to share value with them. Anybody can find an effect or something along those lines. But I think that, from the design top to bottom, this is a more newsy style. You can even say it's a little bit like an ESPN sometimes. But there are other ways that you can create graphics, whether it's an over the shoulder with the hard edges and the square, whether it's a blend where it basically looks a little bit like a layered glass where it fades in. You can do this very easily in Photoshop. I just did my first LinkedIn Live here about a week ago, and I designed the look for that to be a little bit more magazine like, a little bit more office and corporate like, rather than it being hard news and things along those lines. And so I think when you really start looking at what you're trying to do, what you want to communicate, there's a million options out there. It doesn't always have to take the shape of what we're doing by any stretch. This is very common and predictable in a lot of ways. You can get creative and really find a way to blend all of those elements together, and in aggregate, you'll have your own brand and your own image, and that's the whole point of doing it, right?
no, absolutely, absolutely. And Marty, before we get into that video, you also had another example of kind of like a purposeful wipe. I know it's a CNN a picture, right? That where they do a transition in between a video sometimes. I don't know if you had that pulled up.
Let
It
me
was
see.
that it was
Wait,
that
I'll get
sideways
it.
wipe.
Hold on
If
one.
not, I can pull it up on my end if you can't find it. But so a
I
lot of
I
times,
got it.
like Marty was talking about with some guys throwing, like, they have transitions where they throw everything but the kitchen sink, where, like, baseballs transitions and things like that. Well,
Are you talking about this full screen here?
yeah, I'm gonna go to that right now. So this
Okay.
is what we're talking about here. So this they use this a lot, right?
Yep. And that's all. Now this is a still shot. It's not the video, but all those bars they all move and then they reveal, and that is an example of a digital wipe. It's more of a three-dimensional wipe effect. that they use, and also, and then the big one here is not only is it wipe, this wipe will wipe to the host on screen, but it also is the branding of the show. So this particular show is CNN Newsroom with Frederica Whitfield, has all the brand there, and then it separates, it wipes on, and there you go. So yeah, absolutely. But it's adding to the story. And the other thing that you want to think about here is, does it add to what I'm trying to communicate? Like Jeff said, I think Jeff, you hit the nail on the head. Does it add to what I'm trying to communicate, or does it distract from what I'm trying to communicate? And it's so easy to get crazy with the effects and actually be distracting instead of adding, and sometimes less is more.
Mm-hmm.
But and that effect that I just showed, or that screen, is pretty complex, a lot of stuff going on, but it actually adds to it because it's very well done, it's well designed, and it has a lot of information there in a short time. So something to think about.
Absolutely. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to transition to our buddy Art, who watches this show, and he has a nice setup for us that we're gonna take you to right now. So stand by and check this out.
Here's a little tour of my Wirecast setup. I'm running Wirecast 13 right now on a MacBook Pro 2019, 32 gigabytes of RAM. This is my main rack, which is a Sonnet Thunderbolt 3 dock. I'm using a Ubiquiti PoE Plus switch, 24 port switch. I've got a Ubiquiti Edge router, and all my devices are static IPs on a private network, and I use the router to bridge it to whatever WAN I might be getting. I'm using some HyperDeck minis with SDI audio injectors to get ISO recording, baseband ISO recording. It's got a Decklink Duo 2 card in it, so I can do 3 cameras in, because I have 3 Panasonic robotic cameras, 3 cameras in and 1 program feed out. And I ISO all my cameras into 3 HyperDeck minis. I've got a little custom rack panel in the back just to make it easier to get my cables in and out. Tom is my camera operator here, and he's doing the camera control, shading, all that stuff, and we're using the multi-view output with a Luna module to throw it to my iPad Pro 12-inch, and he uses that to monitor the cameras. I'm using the main Wirecast interface to do the switching. I've got a little palette key set up to do my switching. I don't need any fancy surface. I find the bigger surfaces are just too big, too cumbersome, too complicated. I want simple and clean. And that's my Wirecast rack.
So there you go. That's a pretty awesome setup that he has. Marty, what did you think of the setup?
Oh, I see. I love how he uses the different tools in combination. I mean, that's another thing too. A lot of these tools, it's like, take Wirecast for example, right? It's a streaming software. My use case for it. I use it in venue situations, projecting videos on screens. A lot of people use it for live streaming. You could use it to generate graphics, and you can combine these different tools. You can combine multiple instances of Wirecast or another tool. And I think what you can see a iPad in there somewhere. He's combining hardware switches, and again, he's building up and his use case and but combining the tools together and producing the result that he wants. So rarely is it one tool fits all. It's usually a combination of things to get the job done.
It's always good to see like different setups. And Jeff, I know you weren't on the show the one time where we were showing Marty's setup. We got to see your Wirecast setup at some point.
I'd be happy to do a little story on that, put together some material, and at some point, if there's some interest from the community, I could even do a separate show on designing graphics, for this kind of thing. I think the most simple thing you can do is remember that in Photoshop you can make a PNG file, which has different areas.
So Jeff decided that now's the time to turn into a robot. It just it just was weird. It was just out of the blue. I don't know if maybe the gate kind of kicked on a little bit too heavy. I'll let him mess around with that a little bit. But we were doing some finagling behind the scenes. Like you guys didn't see it, unfortunately. Well, no, fortunately you didn't see it. But we were having Jeff was scrambling a little bit to get that going. So, but it worked. Hey. We got in here. We're about ready to wrap the show up, so it doesn't matter. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And next week we'll be here, same bad time, same bad channel. But I want to thank Jeffrey Fitzgerald for joining us, and we'll get that down. And he's back in the studio. He's back in side saddle again. So then thank him, but also Mr. Marty McPadden. I'll thank him. Now, Marty, if I'm understanding this correctly, next week you're on the road, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm in the big city.
He's going to the Big Apple, so he will not be here next week. So now let the rumors start flying. # on social conspiracy. Jeff's gonna start that rumor up again next week. He's gonna be like, see, see, I can say that now because he's afraid to say anything because he's afraid he's gonna turn into Mr. Roboto again. So that's what's coming up next week. We're going to have some fun. We've got some topics that we're going to be discussing. So send in your topics. Go to the Wirecast users group on Facebook. We're always ears for that. Send me an email, stevenh@telestream.net, with your video. Thanks again, Art, for sending that in. We really appreciate it. And, guys, I really appreciate everybody coming out here and joining us. And remember to go subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Telestream Tube channel. And also like us on Facebook, like us on LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time on social.